Week 8 of the 2025 fantasy football season came to a close on Monday Night Football. Now, we are going to look ahead to week number 9, and I'm going to help you guys set your lineup at the running back position. We are going to be going in depth through every single matchup from Thursday Night Football all the way up until Monday Night Football, and I will be telling you guys whether I believe you should start or sit the running backs in all of those games, as well as break down where I believe they will finish by the end of the week. There are 4 teams on bye this week: the Cleveland Browns, the New York Jets, the Philadelphia Eagles, as well as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Before we do get on into things, though, please make sure if you are new to the channel that you hit that subscribe button down below. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. We begin with Thursday Night Football, the Baltimore Ravens at the Miami Dolphins. Now, Derrick Henry did look like himself last week after what can only be described as a disappointing season so far outside of week number 1, where he had that big game up against the Buffalo Bills, slinging out back shots with 29.2 PPR points. Henry has been on the struggle bus, but last week he ended up lighting things up. A top 10 finish at the running back position up against the Bears with 21 carries for 71 yards, as well as 2 touchdowns in a game where Snoop Huntley was under center. And it's kind of shocking that they ended up rolling out Cooper Rush for as long as they did, considering how much better the offense looked when Tyler Huntley was under center. On paper, we have a great matchup for Derrick Henry. The Dolphins allow the 5th most points to running backs on a per game basis, and despite the fact that they were able to have Bijan Robinson locked up like Al Capone last week without the syphilis, I feel like Derrick Henry is going to unleash a good old-fashioned ass whooping with Lamar Jackson back. Henry is a must-start top 8 option in this matchup. Justice Hill is live to just randomly drop 15-plus points in any given game. He did it in week 4 up against the Chiefs in Arrowhead, but with just one game on the year with over 10 PPR points, and with me thinking that the Ravens will just be using Henry a ton, no need to really risk it and play big Justice Hill. For Devon Achane, the Dolphins exploded last week like you stood on a pressure plate in a desert pyramid in Minecraft up against the Atlanta Falcons. Top 8 finish with 18 carries for 67 yards and 5 receptions on 7 targets for a touchdown. All games this season, this guy's finished as a top 17 running back and is as reliable as it gets due to his receiving work. In the 3rd best matchups for running backs on a per game basis, you got to be feeling real nicey about Devon Achane this week, especially since the Dolphins appear to have a slight pulse. Mike McDaniel was cooking with fire last week, and this looked like the Dolphins offense that was amazing back in 2023. I understand that having one great game doesn't mean that the Dolphins are back, and I'm not going to sit here and act like we are going to be a great team going forward, but putting a great defense like the Falcons into a coffin did at least give me some amount of joy for what is a complete and utter fucking disaster of a season. Hopefully Tua wears a visor again and utilizes just one eye, because Pirate Tua was absolutely dominant, because then maybe we will just have some life again. Just like Henry, Achane is a must-start option. I have him as a top 6 running back on the week. Ollie Gordon may actually end up becoming a start-worthy option if McDaniel establishes the run like he did last week. Ollie Gordon had 10 carries for 46 yards and a reception for 20 yards and a touchdown as a top 20 running back. Though, after just one solid game, doesn't mean we need to give the guy the Gawk Gawk 9000 special and throw him into our lineup in a great matchup up against the Ravens. He is still a bench stash as of right now for me. Next up, we move to the 1 p.m. slate of games on Sunday. The Chicago Bears at the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, DeAndre Swift might actually be a high-end running back to rest of season. I have been one of the biggest DeAndre Swift haters over the last few years, and I have been correct. He is the kind of guy that you would draft as the RB20, and he finishes as the RB20, and you're just okay with him being in your lineup every single week. But he has now had 4 straight showings with over 15 PPR points and a touchdown in all 4 of those games. 20-plus points in 2 of his last 3 games. He had 11 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown last week with 2 receptions on 2 targets for 26 yards up against the Ravens in a game in which the team kind of got bent over a table by Snoop Huntley in Baltimore, facing a Bengals defense that just let Breece Hall run and even pass all over them and allows the most points to running backs on a per-game basis. I expect a full-on steak dinner for Swift as a low-end RB1 that you need in your lineup. Kyle Monangai was feeling dangerous, like his name was Baker Mayfield back in week number 7 up against the Saints as the RB12, but he came back down to earth last week in Baltimore as the RB48, just 7 carries for 24 yards after seeing 16 total touches the week prior. I still think he is a solid depth bench piece, but he doesn't appear to really have any standalone value. Turns out that maybe I was right about Chase Brown all along, and it just took 6 straight weeks of being straight up ass, shout out to Mackenzie Dern, to finally show some life. Last week up against the Jets, 12 carries for 73 yards and a touchdown, as well as 3 receptions on 3 targets for 32 yards and a score as a top 6 running back. With Chase Brown healing up, the Bengals offense look way better with Joe Flacco, and with the Bears allowing the 10th most points to running backs on a per game basis, I got Chase Brown as a high-end running back too that is knocking on the door of being a low-end RB1. Samaje Perine turned up the heat last week with 9 rushes for 94 yards and a tug, as well as 1 reception for 6 yards as a high-end running back too. Ultimately, I do believe that Samaje Perine is a fine player, but the odds of that big of a game happening again, especially with how well Chase Brown is playing, feels far too low to even consider starting him. This is very much still Chase Brown's backfield. I won't fall for the trap here. Shout out to Admiral Akbar. I am going to sit him. Now we move to a division rivalry matchup. The cold like Minnesota Vikings at the Detroit Lions. Aaron Jones returned from missing the 4 prior games with injury. As the lead back on the team, he saw 5 carries for 15 yards and 2 receptions on 4 targets for 15 yards up against the Chargers in a game where the Minnesota Vikings offense looked like a steaming pile of dog shit. And honestly, comparing them to a steaming pile of dog shit might even be kind to what we actually saw on Thursday Night Football. Hopefully, J.J. McCarthy can give this offense at least a little bit of an oomph, a little bit of a push, so that Aaron Jones can be okay enough to be at least a break glass in case of emergency RB3. He played 53% of the snaps compared to Mason's 35%. So while the Lions defense is one of the worst matchups for running backs on a per game basis, with a few teams being on bye, I hope you don't actually have to start him, but he is in the fringe RB3 start range. Jordan, the numbers, Mason, what does that mean? What do they mean? Not what does that mean? What the hell? Forgot the saying from one of my favorite video games. Jordan, the numbers, Mason, what do they mean? Had 5 touches for 6 total yards last week, with his spot as the RB1 taken away by Aaron Jones in a brutal matchup. You simply cannot do it. For Jahmyr Gibbs, he had his best game of the season prior to the bye. 17 carries for 136 yards, and not 1, but 2 touchdowns, as well as 3 receptions on 3 targets for 82 yards as the RB numero 2 with 36.8 PPR points. Gibbs has been mighty fine this season, like Pamela Anderson in the new Naked Gun movie. We just saw Kamani Vidal part the Vikings defense like the fucking Red Sea when Moses did that in the 18th best matchup for running backs on a per game basis. I got Jahmyr Gibbs as a top 5 running back. The man is matchup proof. Since we should expect the Lions to steamroll their way through the Vikings, this should be a good spot for Monty to have a good enough game. Though I will note that Monty has been very confusing to figure out this season, and his reliability rating definitely would be relatively low because he hasn't even scored more than 10 points in 4 of 7 games, but I do think they'll be up big on the Vikings, thus be able to run the rock a ton late with a guy like David Montgomery so he could finish as a low-end running back too. Now we move to the Carolina Panthers at the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau. Before we break down this game at the running back position, I would like to ask that if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And I would also like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our partner over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog, and sign up using promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description, you'll get a free pick, plus a first time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus funds, as well as if you do $5 in the pick'em, you receive an additional $100 in bonus funds or in bonus entries. How does the pick'em work? It is incredibly simple. You make at least 2 picks on the higher or the lower. If both picks hit, you get paid. If you do multiple other picks, then the payout will be higher, but they all have to hit. So please make sure you guys do check that out. Promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description. Now, for the Panthers at the Green Bay Packers, we'll start off with the Panthers. Dave Canales continues to be the fucking Riddler with his descriptions of this backfield. Based on what he has said recently to me, it seems like they want to give Rico Dowdle more work, as they gave the keys back to Chuba based on what he earned last season. But again, these are very hard quotes to truly decipher. He also said that giving Rico a higher workload going forward is something that we're looking at. So to me, my best guess would be that they want to use Rico more this week compared to the last 2 games ever since Chuba Hubbard returned. But again, that is just a hunch. These are very hard quotes to look at and really feel a guaranteed type of way about this backfield. This could just be the same exact split we've seen over the last 2 weeks. Last week, we saw Rico Suave have 8 carries for 54 yards. This is a bad matchup for running backs, with the Packers allowing the 30th most points to running backs on a per-game basis. So Rico is a low-end RB2 start, which just goes to show you, when I'm not talking super positively about Rico, that even though I don't feel the most confident in him, the state of the running backs in fantasy football this season is incredibly rough. Chuba's had back-to-back weeks with under 3 yards per carry. He scored last week with 12 carries for 34 yards and that touchdown. Do I expect Chuba to score up against a stout Packers defense? Fuck no, baby. So with all of what I've said regarding this backfield, I think Chuba would be a sit. Josh Jacobs had a comeback down to earth game last week in Pittsburgh against the Steelers on Sunday Night Football. After scoring 2 touchdowns in 3 straight games, he went 13 of 33 for a touchdown with 3 receptions on 3 targets for 12 yards. He now faces a defense that just got devoured by James Cook and allows the 16th most points to running backs on a per game basis. Nothing that we have seen this season would indicate ranking Josh Jacobs anything outside the top 12. And this week, I feel no different about that. I got him as a top 8 option. Emmanuel Wilson looked good last week behind Jacobs and saw his highest amount of snaps on the season with 11 carries for 61 yards, with 3 receptions on 4 targets for 26 yards. Assuming he goes back to his normal 6-ish touches, he won't even come close to being start-worthy. Now we move to the Los Angeles Superchargers at the Tennessee Titans. Now, until O'Marion Hampton returns, Kamani Vidal is a guy you want to have in your lineup. 2 of 3 games without Hampton as a top 10 running back, with his lone down game against a far from ideal matchup with the Indianapolis Colts. You have to feel good about Kamani here up against a Titans defense that allows the 2nd most points to running backs on a per game basis, with Vidal finishing as a top 10 running back up against the Vikings on Thursday Night Football last week with 23 carries for 117 yards and a touchdown, as well as 1 reception on 2 targets for 10 yards. Vidal is a must-start top 12 option for me on the week. Hassan Haskins missed last week with a hamstring injury. Whether he is in or out, are you in, McFly? Whoever the RB2 is on this team, we can't start the Chargers RB2. This is very clearly Vidal's backfield until we end up seeing the return of Hampton. Tajay Spears is in the break glass in case of emergency start range. I would hate to have to do this, as I believe the Titans are going to get smoked, and I don't trust anyone on this offense enough to actually tout them heavily. But with Spears playing 52% of the snaps last week, having 9 carries for 58 yards and a touchdown up against a tough Colts defense with 3 receptions on 3 targets for 23 yards in Indy, I do believe Spears has the ability to have a big game again. He looks better than Pollard in terms of the eye test. Now, Pollard did have 12 touches as well, but he scored just 6.3 PPR points. Again, I am by no means glazing Tajay Spears. I am by no means telling you that you need to play Tajay Spears, but if your running backs are on the struggle bus or you're dealing with bye weeks, Spears can enter your lineup in the RB3 flex range. Tony Pollard was 11 for 44 running the ball last week with 1 reception on 2 targets for 9 yards at the RB34. In the 18th best matchup for running backs, I would prefer just to lean with Tajay Spears. Now we got the Atlanta Falcons at the New England Patriots. Now, Bijan Robinson absolutely shit the bed against the Dolphins. For once, the Dolphins defense actually showed up and locked down the run. Bijan went 9 of 25 for 3 receptions on 3 targets for 23 yards. Now he faces a very tough task for running backs this season against the Patriots. The Patriots are the 27th ranked defense for matchups for the running back position on a per game basis. That defense hasn't allowed a single opponent running back to reach 50 rushing yards in a single game this season, which is the first time a team has done this over the first 8 games since 1950. But at the end of the day, are we ever going to sit Bijan Robinson? The answer to that is Fuck no, baby. I do expect the offense to at least show up in this spot, which they just were not able to do up against the Miami Dolphins. Hopefully Michael Penix plays, because while I don't think that Michael Penix is like the savior of the Falcons, I don't think he's like guaranteed to be their franchise guy. He's better than Cole's Cash Kirk Cousins, who just looked atrocious last week. I mean, Kirk Cousins looked fucking lost in need of a map. I am still starting Bijan as a must-start top 6 running back. Tyler Algier had 4 carries for 4 yards and a touchdown last week with 2 receptions on 2 targets for 10 yards. Algier continues to score random touchdowns that just make you, if you are a Bijan owner, feel incredibly annoyed. 4 touchdowns in 7 games. Ultimately, though, he hasn't eclipsed over 40% of the snaps a single time this season. And with his touches being all over the place weekly, I cannot justify starting him in this bad of a matchup. Now, I'm going to say the same thing I say about Ramondre Stevenson every single week. The guy is the biggest trickster since the fucking Joker. He will have you full on convinced that you need to start him because he has one great game, and then he will proceed to be super mega ass shut out to Phoenix Marie in the very next game. Last week we saw this to a T. Week 7 at Tennessee, he was the RB13. People are jumping for joy. Yippee, I can't wait to play him. Then last week, 14 carries for 34 yards and 1 reception on 2 targets for 15 yards. Now, that was a rough matchup for him up against Cleveland, so I did see the down game coming. But we have seen this multiple times this year. Facing a Falcons defense that allows the 11th most points to running backs on a per-game basis, I am willing to roll the dice on him here. Even if I don't think Ramondre looks good on the field, the team continues to instill trust in him. And they continue to force the ball his way. I think he should be able to muster up a low-end RB2 showing here. Travion Henderson had 10 touches last week, which felt like a fucking miracle, going for 75 yards. Sadly, Ramondre rubbed off on him as he lost a fumble in that game. I have zero idea how many snaps or touches Travion Henderson plays this week. And I think anyone that acts like they know for sure is a straight up liar. They're going to have that Pinocchio nose. With Ramondre still clearly in the driver's seat, I think you cannot play Hendo. Now we move to the San Francisco 49ers at the New York Football Giants. Now the fact that Bijan Robinson shit the bed, and so did Christian McCaffrey in the same exact week, genuinely might be the most shocking thing ever. Christian McCaffrey had a rare blunder game last week in Houston. Not even scoring 10 points is beyond shocking when you have Christian McCaffrey. The 49ers offense couldn't get it up, and there was no Viagra in the cabinet. 8 carries for 25 yards and 3 receptions on 6 targets for 43 yards as the Texans completely shut them down. Control-Alt-Delete. I would be completely flabbergasted if Christian McCaffrey wasn't a top 8 running back at minimum, which is what he has done every single week of the season outside of last week. Facing the Giants defense that allows the 7th most points to the running back position on a per game basis, we should see McCaffrey return to form as a top 3 running back. He is my RB2 on the week. Brian Robinson didn't record a single stat last week and played just 4% of the snaps. I would expect him to be more in that 15% of the snap range this week, and even if they gave him 30+% of the snaps, I don't even think in that scenario he would be startable. So he's a bench stash if you want CMC's handcuff, but that's about all he is. Tyrone Tracy, when he was the team starter prior to his injury, was far from an ideal guy to have in your lineup. I was someone that banged the drum for Tyrone Tracy. I thought he was going to be good based on what we saw last year, but he wasn't, right? But it's important to understand the context of what was going on. Those first 2 1/4 of a game before he got hurt in week 3 was with Russell Wilson, Mr. Unlimited under center. Since then, obviously, Scatterboo took the league by storm, and Jackson Dart had the offense operating correctly. So while Scatterboo looked great, I think Tracy could be a valuable asset in fantasy with Scatterboo out of the picture due to his gruesome injury. I truly hope that he is okay to go at some point next season. That is always so brutal to watch. And it was even more brutal because, like, I was watching Red Zone. I wasn't watching that game. It wasn't a part of my quad box on my other TV. So I'm on Red Zone. I'm watching the other quad box, seeing what the Dolphins are doing. Scott Hansen's like, oh, we have a bad injury here for Scatterboo, basically. And I'm like, it's probably not that bad if they're going to, show it. No, it was really bad. It was gruesome. So I hope that Cam Scatterboo is okay, obviously. He just seems like such a nice, fun guy. It's like a mushroom joke. He seems like a nice guy. So hope he's okay. The 49ers are the 14th best matchup for running backs. And with what I know about Tracy dating back to last season, I expect a mid-range running back 2 showing for him this week. Devin Singletary will pick up the scraps for Tracy like he did for Scatterboo over the last few weeks. Him seeing more than 5 touches, though, to me seems unlikely. The man hasn't scored more than 4 points a single time this season, so he would be a clear sit. Now we move to the Indianapolis Colts at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jonathan Taylor is about as must start as it gets. If you have him, you didn't even need to watch this section of the video because you knew you were going to start him. I don't want to give this guy the Gawk Gawk 9000 special and spend 5 minutes glazing him, but I think there's a legitimate reason to believe that Jonathan Taylor should be the league's MVP. Their offensive line is incredible, and Taylor is just jamming it down the throat of the defense week in and week out. 3 of 8 games this season as the RB1. And 5 of 8 games as a top 3 running back. This dude is a cheat code. Last week, he had the Titans defense on their knees, begging for mercy. Please, Mr. Taylor, don't score a 3rd touchdown. 12 carries for 153 yards, and not 1, but 2 rushing touchdowns, as well as 2 receptions on 2 targets for 21 yards, and an additional touchdown. Back-to-back weeks with 3 total touchdowns in each game. In the 17th best matchup for running backs, Jonathan Taylor is a top 3 running back for me this week, and he's not 3, he's not 2, he is my RB number 1 prostitute in all of Kazakhstan. Wawa. Now, last week, DJ Giddens was a healthy scratch, so we saw Abdullah and Goodson. Regardless of who the RB2 is in Indy, JT is a bell cow back, so they cannot touch your lineup. For Pittsburgh, Jaylen Warren struggled last week up against the Packers with 13 carries for 62 yards and 2 receptions on 3 targets for 11 yards as the RB28. Now, that was a tough matchup, so you can excuse that. But this week, he also faces another tough matchup for running backs against the Colts, who are the 26th best matchup for running backs on a per-game basis. Warren has been a reliable RB2 asset this season, so I think he should be fine, right? But the matchup definitely makes it feel very possible that he could go bust again. Pause, right? Would be like the RB28 again. So definitely fine playing him as a low-end RB2 because, again, bunch of teams on bye. The running backs as a whole are very dicey, but I'm not the most excited to play Jaylen Warren this week. Gainwell just doesn't see remotely enough work to justify playing him at this point in the season. We have seen the flashes of talent, but the team just likes Warren more. So he's just not going to get enough touches to be start-worthy. Now we move to the Denver Broncos at the Houston Texans. Now, J.K. Dobbins put on a show last week. Sadly, it wasn't a big show like Paul Wright, as he didn't find the end zone against the Dallas Cowboys. RB17 with 15 carries for 111 yards and 2 receptions on 2 targets for 10 yards. R.J. Harvey scored 3 touchdowns, leaving Dobbins with nothing. And while R.J. Harvey Dent did score 3 touchdowns last week, I think that was more of an anomaly compared to what will be a normal occurrence. Dobbins is still the clear lead back, and Harvey is still getting just 20 to 30% of the team snaps. So with Dobbins being a reliable mid-range running back 2 asset weekly, I will have him ranked this way this week, even in a matchup that doesn't look the best up against the Texans defense that allows the 24th most points to running backs on a per-game basis and just completely locked the door and threw away the key on Christian McCaffrey last week. Harvey's going to remain on my bench. I get he was the running back 6 last week. 7 carries for 46 yards and 2 touchdowns with 1 reception on 1 target for 5 yards. If you guys remember, though, earlier on in the season, we saw this spark. We saw the pizzazz, right? Up against the Bengals. And he followed that up with 3 straight games with less than 8 fantasy points. I won't fall for the trap here. I will be sitting him. Woody Marks has a friend in me over the last 2 weeks. Back-to-back games as the RB16 last week against the San Francisco 49ers. 11 rushes for 62 yards and 4 receptions on 4 targets for 49 yards. He now faces the Denver defense that allows the 22nd most points to RBs on a per-game basis. I'm still very pessimistic about the Texans offense as a whole, but they did look good last week, so while the offensive line scares the ever-living shit out of me, Woody Marks is a fine low-end RB2 start this week. 9-inch Nicholas Chubb is still very involved in this offense, which again is another reason not to get too high and mighty. Bang in your chest for Woody Marks. Last week, he had 17 carries for 56 yards and 2 receptions on 2 targets for 13 yards. The week prior, to that, he had just 6 touches. Too much of a guessing game for me to consider playing him, though. Next up, we move to the 4:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate with the Jacksonville Jaguars. This time not in Duval. This game is in Viva Las Vegas up against the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, Travis Etienne has given us blue balls over the last 3 games. I feel like I need to go lift a fucking fridge. To start off the year, 3 of 4 games inside the top 14. You're feeling great. You're feeling nicey, to honor John Gruden, former Raiders coach. After that, he scored fewer than 10 points in 3 straight games. Do I worry slightly? Yes, I do. But Etienne is still very clearly the lead back on the team, and despite the fact that the offense as a whole got dunked on Victor Wembanyama style by the Rams in the UK in it prior to the bye, I expect them to wake up this week in the 16th best matchup for running backs on a per-game basis. He is a high-end RB2 for me. I like Bishal Tootin. I think he's a solid player, but with the team giving him fewer than 30% of the snaps every single week of the season, and Etienne clearly being the lead back on the team, he's just a bench stash. For Ashton Jeanty, this guy is just a victim of the Raiders offense being a disgrace to the National Football League. Watching the Raiders offense is so frustrating that it has become genuinely hard to watch at points. Prior to the bye, up against the Chiefs in Kansas City, he was 6 of 21 with 1 reception on 1 target for 13 yards. Not his fault, right? That was a game in which the Raiders got their backs blown out and didn't score a single point. I don't project this week to be as brutal, as the Raiders should at least score some points. Even with the woes of the Raiders offense from weeks 4 through 6, he scored 15 plus points in all 3 games. I don't like the matchup here up against the Jaguars. They're the 25th best matchup for running backs. Jeanty is a beast though, so I still got him as a high-end RB2. Raheem Mostert, I refuse to start Mostert, who's the RB2 on one of, if not the most dreadful offenses in the league, so there's no need to roster him. Now we move to the Saints at the Los Angeles Rams. Now, Alvin Kamara is in the high-end RB3, break glass in case of emergency type of range at the running back position. The team continues to get face fucked on a weekly basis, and even with Kendre Miller now deleted out of the picture, they just don't dump the ball off his way anymore. Back-to-back games with just 2 or 3 targets, facing the 31st ranked defense in terms of points allowed per game to the running backs. I don't think you should feel any ounce of joy putting this guy inside of your lineup. Now, I still do think deep down the big game is inside of him. I still think deep down, maybe one of these days, we're going to see him percolate and have that big game. But against this defense, I just don't think it will be this week. Our only hope here, Obi-Wan, is that Tyler Shuck could just force feed the ball, dumping off the ball to him because Spencer Rattler has been benched. I know, Nick, you make fun of Spencer Rattler all the time. Tyler Shuck really that much better? Is he? And was Spencer Rattler even playing bad enough to get benched last week? I don't know. Even without Kendre Miller, though, Devin Neal played 46% of the snaps, but had just 3 total touches for 11 yards. In such a brutal matchup, you just cannot play him. For the Rams, despite the Rams hitting the Jaguars with one of those big hammers that Mario uses in those old video games, Kyren Williams struggled in London prior to the bye in week number 7, 12 carries for 54 yards and 2 receptions on 3 targets for 11 yards. We have seen some inconsistencies in Kyren's game this season, but ultimately in the 13th best matchup for running backs on a per game basis up against the Saints, in a matchup where I project them to be up late running the rock, where Kyren Williams lives inside of the end zone. Match that with the big games that we've seen out of Kyren this season. Coming out the bye week, I expect him to get his swagger back and finish as a low-end running back number 2. For Blake Corum, he saw his highest amount of snaps in their last showing, turning his highest touch count with 13 into 43 all-purpose yards. Even when the guy gets the carries, he still struggles. So even in a good matchup with his snaps likely to decrease, there is no reason to play him. He is just a handcuff. Now we move to the game of the week, the Kansas City Chiefs at the no one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. We're to be seeing a bukkake of points in this game for fantasy football. James Cook had a day like those old NFL graphics coming out the bye week as a top 3 running back up against the Carolina Panthers with 19 carries for 216 yards and 2 touchdowns. Prior to the bye, he was on the struggle bus, and I am very happy to see him break out of that. James Cook has been a top 10 back in PPR in 5-7 games. I get the Chiefs are one of the worst matchups on paper for running backs, so this could be a down game. But based on what I saw last week, and based upon how many touches James Cook sees on a weekly basis, I don't think you can fade him and bury him down the rankings. He's a low-end RB1 for me on the week, especially when you consider the fact that last year, both times these two teams played in the regular season and in the playoffs, and this wasn't, the Chiefs' run defense isn't just way different this year. They were the worst matchup for running backs on a per-game basis last year. I looked it up, and still James Cook scored 19-plus PPR points in each game, so I think he's definitely still a stone-cold lock to finish inside the top 12. Even with Ty Johnson seeing 30+% of the snaps in back-to-back weeks, just 6 total touches over that stretch, no need to start him this week, or frankly, any week with James Cook healthy. Pacheco hurt his leg last week. How serious was it is still very much in question as we're sitting here on Tuesday. If he plays, I'm not touching him with a 10-foot pole. This backfield feels like a giant guessing game, and it could be a guessing game where you guess and all of the choices were wrong, right? It's not guaranteed that one of these guys will be right. They could all just be wrong, right? I get this is a juicy matchup. It's the 6th best matchup for running backs on a per-game basis, but I can't do it with Pacheco. Now, if Pacheco cannot play because of that leg injury, had him limping off the field, then he kind of went to the table, they were stretching him out, and then he kind of started walking fine. Again, I don't know if that's like the adrenaline, what it is, how that shit works. I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins, but if Pacheco is out, I think Kareem would be a low-end RB2 start since he just keeps finding the end zone. If they're all in, Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, Rashard Smith, they would all be sits for me. Now we move to, cause you waited all day for Sunday night. The Seattle Seahawks at the left hands up. Who are we? The Commanders on Sunday Night Football. Now, Zach Charbonnet continues to not run well, but will continue to just score a million touchdowns. The team should be feeding Kenneth Walker more, but they won't. They clearly want to use a 2-back system, in which Charbonnet has outsnapped Walker in 3 straight games. In a break glass in case of emergency, running back 3 range for me on the week. Charbonnet is start worthy strictly due to the touchdown upside. He may be a touchdown or bust guy, but at least on the season, he scored in 4 of 6 of the games this year. And in his last game out up against Houston prior to the bye, he had 12 carries for 49 yards and 2 touchdowns with 2 receptions on 2 targets for 6 yards. Again, I'm not going to sit here and glaze Zach Charbonnet, tell you that Zach Charbonnet is the fucking greatest running back ever, because he's not. Kenneth Walker is clearly better than him. But if they want to keep giving Charbonnet the rock in the red zone in the 15th best matchup for running backs, you can start Charbonnet as a desperation start. I'm done with Kenneth Walker, as simply put as it could be. How can I make any argument to start this man when he has virtually 0 zilch touchdown upside? He hasn't scored in 4 straight games, and Charbonnet lives rent-free inside the end zone. We know what is going to happen. Walker could run like prime Adrian Peterson, and then after doing all that, getting the team into the red zone, getting the team onto the 1-yard line, he could be a literal centimeter away from the end zone. And you know what's going to happen? Come on in, Charbonnet. It's your time to shine. High five. And you get to score the touchdown. This is not an Oprah Winfrey offense. You get a touchdown. You get a touchdown. You all get a touchdown. All the touchdowns go to Charbonnet. The only chance he has to score is if he busts off a huge run and just walks right into the end zone. The guy barely sees any receiving work, and even if he is an effective running back running the rock, he may not even score more than 10 fantasy points, which he hasn't done in 3 straight games prior to the bye. I'm not doing it. Now, I think Bill Nye, the science guy, Bill Krosky Merritt, has the ability to be a great fantasy asset. But how many times does this guy have to fuck you directly up the ass before you say enough is enough? As J. Cole once said, fool me one time, shame on you. Fool me twice, can't put the blame on you. Fool me 3 times, fuck the peace sign, load the chopper, let it rain on you. 3 straight horrid performances from JCM has me ready to vote this man off the island. I think if Daniels plays, maybe things get better, but I also can't even project a great game from this Commanders offense. And they might just be down, and if they're down, guess what? JCM doesn't catch passes, so he won't be involved. I am done with Bill. Done. Jeremy McNichols scored 11.8 PPR points up against the Chiefs on Monday Night Football. He had 5 receptions on 6 targets for 64 yards and 1 rush for 4 yards. I don't think he has that good of a game again, so I can't start him in the 23rd best matchup for running backs on a per-game basis. Dun, 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 dun. Monday Night Football, the Arizona Cardinals at the Dallas Cowboys. This may be our last ride with Bam Zonovan Knight as a start-worthy option, as Trey Benson is eligible to return to practice next week. That doesn't guarantee that he will be back, or even return to practice. But based on timelines when he got hurt, I would assume he is back in short order. The team just cut Michael Carter, so even more of the workload should be handed to Bam Knight up against Dallas. But they're also reporting that he may be signed back to the team. So who really knows, right? Who really knows? The Cowboys are the 4th best matchup for running backs on a per-game basis. He has been a top 24 running back in back-to-back games prior to last week's bye. So with basically everything going right for him to have a big game this week, I got him as a mid-range RB number 2. Amadi DiMarcado should be the RB2 if they don't bring Carter back. He could fluke his way into a solid game here because, again, the Cowboys defense really is that bad. Anyone can have a good game, but I just would not play him. Javonte Williams got his sweet revenge last week up against the Broncos. Despite the fact that the Cowboys got fisted, Javonte recorded his 2nd game in a row as a top 12 running back, 13 carries in Denver for 41 yards and 2 scores, as well as 1 reception on 2 targets for 8 yards. I understand that Dak crumbled like the Ottoman Empire in that game, but it isn't that crazy because, it wasn't against a bad defense. It was against the Broncos. So facing the Cardinals, this is a get-right game here. The Cardinals are the 19th best matchup for running backs on a per-game basis. So in a mid-range matchup with Javonte being a reliable RB1 top 12 asset all season, he is a top 10 must-start running back for me on the week. Jadon Bonnie Blue continues to do very little with the opportunities he has been given. He fumbled last week with 8 carries for 29 yards. Javonte is clearly in the driver's seat, and Blue has yet to eclipse 25% of the snaps. He belongs on your bench or on the waivers. Thank you guys all so much for watching. If you have enjoyed today's video, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video to help you out a ton. Check out one of the videos on your screen if you have not seen them already. I love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great one. As always, good boy.